When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
GenXGrownUp is a YouTube channel, website, and audio podcast you're listening to right now. All made for and by people who love exploring media, games, tech, and toys of yesterday and today through the eyes of Gen Xers who refuse to grow up.
Your dinner cannot just be French fries. Basically, life sucks as a grown-up.
Hi, and welcome to a special edition of the GenXGrownUp podcast. You know, occasionally we get asked to review books, and we generally say no because the books that we're asked to look at really don't reflect anything about Gen X growing up or kind of what the channel is about. But we were given a book called We Be Dragons by Michael Weitz, and let me tell you, this book checks off so many things about what it means to be a Gen X grown up and to grow up in that era. In case you happen to hear my voice sound a little bit different during this interview, that was because I had some issues with the audio and had to make some corrections, so I hope it's not too distracting. But this book was a real pleasure to read, and I started by asking him to simply describe what the book's about.
It's a coming-of-age story about a young man who's about 17 years old, and he lives in a very small town, and he's just dealing with his need, really, his not anxiety, but he's got this anxiousness to leave. Mm-hmm. You know, it's his junior year. It's the summer before his senior year in high school, and he's saving money to go to college. And he's just dealing with that small town. I got to get out. I want to see the rest of the world. But there's other things going on. You know, the love of his life, he believes, doesn't know he exists. He's dealing with small town jobs where, you know, it's there's not that many to go around in a small town. And then he and his friends play Dungeons and Dragons, and that's kind of their escape, you know, if you will, of small town reality. It's their way of being able to just hang out and enjoy themselves without having to deal with the small town pressures.
That's great. What prompted you to write this?
Well, I want to say it was 2022. I read a book called Slaying the Dragon by a gentleman named Ben Riggs, and that was a nonfiction book about TSR, the company that actually created and published Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. For those of you interested, I'll have a link to the book, Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons and Dragons in the show notes.
And I just saw it at the library and I picked it up and I read it, and it started to just trigger, you know, a lot of memories for me. Mm-hmm. And just thinking about imagination and how important it was growing up and things like that. And so that book was kind of the catalyst. But the more I thought about it, the more I began to think about how important imagination is and how it was for me and how important it was to my growing up and so forth. And some of these ideas just started just popping off in my head, and that idea just kind of latched on and off we went.
Now, having grown up in New York City, I knew very little about what it was like to grow up in a small town. But having read this book, I definitely feel like I've got more of a feel of it. So was this from personal experience? Is there a little bit of yourself in this book?
Well, I think every writer or author draws some from them, but in this case, you're absolutely right about the small town. I grew up in a small community, 3,000 people, and it was a small farming community. So very much so, I drew right from my own personal life. Yeah.
Did you actually work on a farm?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much everybody did. It's where I lived. Colfax, Washington is where I'm from, and it's surrounded by wheat fields, lentils, so forth. And pretty much every kid works on a farm at one point or another. And yes, I drove truck during harvest, and I drove the swather that I describe in the book, and so forth. Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So a big part of the book is, your friends and or the friends and John's friends are playing Dungeons and Dragons. And then there's this group that I remember Satanic Panic back in the 80s when they thought music and Dungeons and Dragons and all these things were causing, the youth of America to go straight to hell, I guess. But like I said, I grew up in New York City. So honestly, it was something more like I read about in the news. It was something that came up on the evening news kind of story. I didn't really live it.
Right.
Was that something you experienced?
Not to the degree that it's described in the book, but we definitely had, there was a guy that we wanted to play with us. He wanted to join the group, and we were like, yeah, come on and play. That's fine. But his mom said, absolutely not. She had watched the newscasts or the news stories and so forth, and she wouldn't let him do it. And then another friend of mine, his dad actually heard rumblings. I guess some people talked to his dad, like, how can you let him do this? Haven't you watched the news? Can't, all the Satanism and sort of stuff. And, that was pretty much the extent of it. My own mom, she had heard all of that as well, but she trusted me enough to just let me go. But she was curious. She wanted to read it. She wanted to read through the books. And I actually took her through a dungeon. Just a quick, so she could see what it was like to play. And she thought it was cool, and she was like, yeah, go for it.
If I remember correctly, in the book, John does the same thing with his mom, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I remember that part.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, listeners. For those of you interested, GenXGrownUp actually did a whole podcast about that satanic panic of the 1980s. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So we pick up the interview where I asked Michael Weitz to read an excerpt from his book.
Nick thumped a six-pack of Mountain Dew on the table. It's a little after 8 now, he said. If we eat and drink all this shit, we'll be playing till dawn. Toph laughed. We've done it before. Okay, said John. He shook out a mound of Cheetos onto the table in front of him and passed the bag to Truck. Do you guys remember where we left off last night? He asked. Being the dungeon master gave John some sense of control, of order, even when everything else seemed to be out of his hands. He sat forward, the idea of farming already fading as he turned his thoughts to the game. Truck nodded as he popped a couple of peanuts in his mouth. Dark, empty building, locked doors to the outside on the right. Super dark archway to the left, he said. Right, confirmed John. So, what are you going to do?
That's right. And the reason why I asked you to read that, I love that passage, is I read that and it took me back to when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. That could have been a conversation we had 10,000 times.
Absolutely.
Before leading into any of those, like the Mountain Dew and sodas and the snacks and that statement. So what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Because that seems like after the recap, then that's always the leading question. So that passage in particular just totally took me back to sitting around that table, and I felt for all the people right there.
That's great.
What was your experience with RPGs growing up?
We played D&D, Advanced Dungeons. We always started with the basic set and then pretty much jumped right into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And my friend of mine, actually the guy, Jason, who I dedicated the book to, he's the one who taught me how to play. And he taught me when we were in about 6th grade. And we played... Man, I can't even think of how often we played. Every weekend, whenever, vacations, all the time. Even when we got older in high school and we had girlfriends, it was like, well, we're going to play D&D tonight. She wants to go to a movie. Oh, well, we're going to play. So, and
do you still play it all today?
I haven't played in quite a while. I do have a couple of friends who want to see if we can get a game going, but just life so far just hasn't cooperated where we've been able to do that. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure.
I still love it. I still have the books. I still have the dungeon modules and everything. And I used all of that for the research in this book. So
what was the appeal to you for playing these games when you were younger?
it was really the imagination, and it was the ability to really just travel to other worlds and use our imagination to problem solve. It's amazing how we were able to, as a group, solve so many problems and just work together. I mean, it was such a teaching tool. I didn't realize that at the time, that I was learning how to interact with people and how to deal with people having disagreements and so forth. But the main appeal was just the imagination. And I 100% think that Dungeons and Dragons helped me become a writer, because we had the dungeon modules, but I also spent a lot of time writing my own adventures. And
that's great.
And that was just fantastic. It got us into reading. Like John's mom says in the book, their vocabulary levels went up. You'd learned so much, and it was great. So, but yeah, it was the imagination. It was the escape factor.
I am your host, Stassi Schroeder. Welcome to Tell Me Lies, the official podcast. What's the most unhinged thing of season 3?
Steven, because he's so evil.
I do think he is misunderstood.
You see everyone face consequences. It's intoxicating.
The writers just know how to trick you.
There's always a twist in this show. It's nothing you would expect.
Tell Me Lies, the official podcast, January 6th, and stream the new season of Tell Me Lies, January 13th on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
This episode is brought to you by Dead Man's Wire, the new film from Roque Entertainment. Dead Man's Wire is the incredible true story of the 1977 kidnapping that turned an aspiring entrepreneur into an outlaw folk hero. Directed by legendary filmmaker Gus Van Sant, Dead Man's Wire stars Bill Skarsgård, Dacre Montgomery, Carrie Elways, and Myha'la, with Coleman Domingo and Al Pacino. Now playing in select theaters everywhere January 16th.
Hey, listeners, this is Mo interrupting again. Just so you know, we actually did a whole podcast on Dungeons and Dragons, and I'll throw a link to that in the show notes. And we also did some videos about some Dungeons and Dragons related electronic games, and I'll put notes of those in as well. One thing about this book, which I thought was really unique, was that there was actually 3 parts to it. There was the life of the person living in the small town, there was the game sessions that he had, and then they actually did narration of the game sessions as though you were actually reading a fantasy novel. I asked Michael about how he came up with that and how much work it was to do.
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm glad. I was so glad to hear that you got that. Because I was when I was all done, I was like, man, is anybody going to get that? There are literally 3 stories in this book, and when you said that, I was like, awesome. That's great. When I didn't. You're absolutely right. I had to write 3. I actually wrote the entire dungeon that they play. I have the maps. I have every room, all of that, because I had to know what they were playing. And so, but I actually wrote that as I was writing I wrote them all together at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And it was a conscious decision between the chapters to make sure that, because I wanted to make sure that people who don't play Dungeons and Dragons understood how that transition was happening, that we were leaping into the game itself. So I had to make sure that the last couple sentences of one chapter matched, the beginning of the next chapter when it entered the game. And so it was definitely a conscious decision. I wouldn't say that it flowed that easily, but the more I thought about it later in the book, as I was getting on it, it became a little easier because I knew, then how I had to do it. But having the game, the fake dungeon is called Alchemist Bane, having that already done and in the box, so to speak, was able to lead those characters in that direction and so forth. So, well, then again, I'm very happy that you got all that.
The one thing I really appreciated too when reading the adventure parts, I call it that, is that you didn't, and I've seen this so much in books where they just try to almost literally take the play game and turn it into a story somehow.
The way I looked at it was, I had all of the history, I had the storyline of that adventure and everything, but it wasn't really imperative to the book itself, because the kids had already started the game. So there was a little bit of background there at the beginning, just
Sure.
so the reader kind of knew why they were and what their goal was and so forth. But other than that, yeah, I didn't need to go into all the exposition and so forth. So it was really a matter of the way I looked at it. When I played Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe this is true for you too, but that world is how I believe the boys are imagining the game. Right. So like when we played D&D, as a kid, I say I'm going to do this or whatever, but I can see that world, in my head and so forth. And so that's really that's their imagination playing through the game.
Were there any authors or books in particular you read either back then or now that kind of influenced your writing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I was lucky enough to have parents who encouraged reading my entire life. I mean, I don't remember ever not reading, frankly, but it was, for us anyway, junior high and into high school, we read a lot of sci-fi, a lot of fantasy. So, Terry Brooks, the Shannara series was big. Yeah. Of course, read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings back then. Stephen King was a big one on my list. I read It and Cujo, and so there was a good mix there. There was one book that everybody in our group read. The author was Joel Rosenberg.
Oh yeah,
and the Sleeping Dragon series.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're very
so that was a big one. We read. I think there was a trilogy back then. I think he may have added more to that, but we only read the first three. I can never pronounce her name. Jean Owl, the Clan of the Cave Bear.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
I read those first three, so I had a pretty good mix. But yeah, definitely a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game was a big one. Back then, and I think all of them have a certain kind of ability to kind of just seep into your brain. I don't know if any one of them inspired me necessarily, but as opposed to all of them kind of do, because I just love the idea of storytelling and that craft of being able to get that out there. And all of those authors were huge, to when I read them, I thought, oh man, this is the best book ever, and then I read the next one. Oh, that's the best,
Hey listeners, while speaking with Michael, I've always been very curious about what it's like to be a publisher today. So I decided to ask him since he has firsthand experience.
Well, I think today there are more avenues, for you to go down in order to get published. I have a regular job, believe me. I'm not making a living off of this, unfortunately, but I think that the self-publishing arm today has made it very accessible to a lot more people who want to write and get their work out there. I think the negative side of that, though, is especially when it was first happening, the digital ability to publish without a publishing house, people would just write a first draft publishing and throw it out there. And that put a really sour taste in everybody's mouth about self-publishing. So I think it's really important that self-publishers make sure they get an independent editor, cover designer, all of that, because all of it makes such a major impact on the reader, but in terms of getting published, the thing is that back then there were more publishing houses, and today they've all been bought. I think there's only like 5.
Yeah, I think,
or something like that. And then they all have the imprints underneath them. So there's only 5 publishers that own everything. So in that regard, it's pretty difficult. And like this book, I talked to a couple of agents, and they said, "This is what bookshelf does it go on? Does it go on young adult? Does it go on fantasy? Because they're 2 separate genres like that, as opposed to kind of combined." And I don't know. I mean, on one hand, the thing I really like about self-publishing these days is that as a writer, you can write what you want, as opposed to the major publishing houses these days. They want you to write to what the market wants.
Right.
And as a writer, to me anyway, it's like, I don't want to write a romantasy. I know that's popular, but that's not in my head, So I think so. In some aspects, it's similar, because it is still difficult to get published by, the big 5 or whatever, and get an agent. You have to have an agent in order to even break into that. But on the other hand, though, I think there's a lot of good stories coming out, and people have realized that if I'm going to self-publish, I got to make sure that it's of a certain quality.
How do you get your book out there? Like, how do you make people aware of it?
It's, a lot of social media is a huge factor. So there's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, if depending on the age groups that you're trying to market to, even LinkedIn. So those are all certain ideas. Just calling up bookstores and newspapers and any kind of media to get it out there. It's I'll tell you, man, it's difficult. It really is. So I actually have somebody helping me. My wife was gracious enough to say, "Hey, we're going to do this one right. Let's get a professional to help us out here and get this book out there." And it's difficult to get people going, because when you are an unknown name, it depends. People just like, do I want to take a chance on that? So. Right. But it's great definitely to have podcasts like this that reach an audience, and you were willing to take a chance on my book, and here we are. So.
So the title of the book, We Be Dragons, where did that come from?
Yeah, I actually had a tough time with the title of this. There were a couple other ones that I was playing around with before I landed on that. But yeah, there's a couple instances in the book where something happens, and you're right, it's just something courageous or something cool or whatever, and the rest of the group will decide on whether that was dragon worthy or not. The person doing that doesn't get to decide, but the rest of the group will say, "Oh yeah, that's dragon worthy." And so it was kind of that idea of not necessarily nerds. I don't want to use that term, but especially back then when D&D was first coming out and people were playing it, and there was like a certain group of kids who probably weren't the most popular or whatever. Yeah. But, they were still people. They still had imaginations. We still did things. And so their group is saying, you know what? That was dragon worthy, man. That was awesome. Good for you. And so, yeah, the title is We Be Dragons, man. We are good to go.
Cool. So what's next for you as far as writing?
I have a few ideas. I've really played sort of with an idea of a sequel for this book, or maybe even a prequel. Since this book takes place the summer before their senior year, there's still the possibility of doing it. I mean, if I wanted to stay out of the whole school system, I could just do it the summer before they all go to college or separate. I've also toyed with the idea of going back earlier in their lives, like when they were first learning to play D&D. So that's a possibility. But I've got 3 or 4 other books. One of them is a kind of a speculative novel set in the near future. Not lasers and space or anything. not going that far. But I've got a few ideas, and so I'm just trying to decide on what I want to focus on.
So Michael, I really want to thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
And that was our interview with Michael Weitz, author of We Be Dragons. Links to this book and some of his other works will be in our show notes. Thanks for listening. Take care.
No life, no fun. Don't you know that you're a grown-up?
GenXGrownUp is a member of the Evergreen Podcast family. Learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.
No more watching shows till sunrise. Unacceptable for grown-ups. Your dinner cannot just be French fries. Basically, life sucks as a grown-up.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.